Hey guys, and welcome back to the Traders Show, where we bring you everything updated about the financial markets, live here from Nairobi, Kenya. So I'm your host today, Caleb, and Ken will be with me today, and we'll be talking about the global tariffs. If you watched a previous video of mine, there's a video I posted about, let's say, about a month ago, when the tariffs, just before Trump hiked the high tariffs that were there I remember it was actually on April 9th, because it was actually a very historical moment. So those are dates to remember. So before that, I'd uploaded a video where we talked about tariffs, what they are and how they affect the market. So if you haven't watched that video, just look for it in our YouTube, or also there's a link up here that has just popped up, so you can also watch it. But anyway, so today we're going to talk about what is happening around the markets, how is it affecting the stock markets, what the currencies market, commodities market, crypto market, what it means for the economies, what we're expecting ahead, and how maybe you can prepare yourself. Like we keep saying, this is not financial advice. We're not telling you what to buy and what to trade. These are our own opinions, our own insights, and we do what it takes we do our own positions depending on the information you have and the analysis we are doing in the markets. Remember, as a day trader, we keep saying this a lot, and I always say it in our previous videos. Strong opinions weakly held. So we might be strongly opinionated today, but tomorrow you might find us changing our position because of new information that comes to the market. Just like now, recently, yesterday, if I speak in terms of dates, today is May 13th. So yesterday, May 12th, Trump and China came to a deal, or rather not Trump and China, but US and China came to a deal, and they lowered their tariffs for a 90-day period before they renegotiate to new terms. But those are things we'll talk about. I just wanted to introduce the podcast for today and allow Ken to introduce himself.
So hi guys. I think for me it's been quite a minute before I did a video, especially on YouTube. I've been doing webinars and other things, but it's been quite some time since I did a video. But I still trade, still looking at markets, still developing, still learning, and just doing new things. Today we're going to talk about tariffs, like Aliba said. This has been, I think, what has been moving markets for the last 2 months, ever since the beginning of April when Trump came out to the Liberation Day. And I think it's important for people to really understand, especially for the new guys, the guys who have not traded in a volatile market, you don't know even what fundamentals are. Because I remember sometimes when I would wake up, like I can imagine yesterday's moves were quite surprising to someone who's new in the market and who's not gotten used to volatility. And especially knowing, we know when, like for me now, I think I've gotten to a point where I know when a market is just moving normally, technically, when there's a catalyst, when there's something just behind the market, you can see it in how prices move either up and down. So today we're going to talk about tariffs, just shed some light on them for people to understand. And I think I'd like us to approach it in a way where we would start with where this all started and where we are and where we think this is going. So I think to start off, Caleb, will you just explain to people what a trade war really is and what tariffs really are and why we currently are where we are?
Okay. So I think I'll start with tariffs. You can talk more about, you like wars, so you talk about the trade war.
I like wars. That's how you describe me.
Well, they fascinate you and how countries affect one another. Let me explain what tariffs are, just like I did in the previous video, but it's fine to explain here again. So tariffs, more or less, is what the Americans call, more or less, they're like the tax when people are shipping goods into the country, more or less. So the name that is given to that is tariffs. So people normally ask who benefits most from tariffs, who doesn't. So for example, if let's talk about the United States and China, because they're the biggest, they're the ones who have the biggest trade war at the moment in terms of tariffs and all that. So if United States has a 10% tariff, it means if you ship a car from China, let's say you're shipping BYD, and I used this example in the previous video. The BYD, why I'm talking about this is because BYD, if you don't know, it's the electric car maker that is competing against Tesla. And I don't know if it was last quarter or last year, they did more revenues for the first time, more than Tesla, which they did over $100 billion in revenue. So if you're shipping a BYD car from China to America, and maybe the tariff rate or the tax is 10%, it means if the car is $100,000, more or less it's going to retail in America for more than that. Put a markup of 10% or a bit more depending on the charges that are there. So 110, 120 plus thousand depending on the dealership you're dealing with. So you have to pay that markup price because the people who imported the car have to pay that fee. So for them to make a profit, they have to charge a higher fee to the person who's going to buy it later on the other side. Then on the other side, if you look at China, maybe they also have maybe a 20% tariff on American goods. Same thing. So the people who pay the tariffs, most people normally think is the person who's exporting it. So people think the Chinese are the ones who are exporting are going to pay the tariffs, but rather the tariffs are paid by the person who has imported those goods. So the American people are the ones who pay for those goods or that tariff price for the good to enter the country. Another funny one, I was watching, and some of us may know this guy, Al Karanja. Some latest post, he was giving an example between the Prado S250, the new model that Kenyans really love, and the LC300, the V8 Land Cruiser. So he's showing the prices. Do you know how much? So the Land Cruiser,
Prado.
Both of them, they retail for the same price. A bit slight different, but they retail in Kenya for $135,000. So you get it at about 18 to 20 million Kenya shillings. Do you know how much is sold from the factory? If you're in Japan, do you know how much you buy it for?
No.
Wild guess. If it's 135 here.
60, 50, 60.
35. $35,000.
So you're adding an extra 100
Imagine, bro, 3 times. 3 times.
for tariffs and all that.
More or less. So those expenses, shipping it, the duty that you pay entering the country. So those are the difference in prices. So now this war that China started with Americans is where Americans were even hiking up the prices to around 145% on those tariffs. So meaning if a car, the BYD example that I'm using, enters the country and the importer imported it at 100,000, there's the tariff duty that they need to pay over markup of 145%. So meaning you have to pay $245,000. So they have to sell it at a much higher price, maybe going even to the 300s. So this car that was once 110 is now much more than that. We're giving you the chance to learn Forex for free at Financial Hub. But there's a little twist to it. All you need to do is fund your Paperstone account and boom, you're all in. Deposit $100 and get access to our basic course. Perfect for beginners. Or deposit $250 and get access to our exclusive course that is best for advanced traders. Why is this huge? Because you get to learn while you earn. Trade the real money and get real experience. And also you get lifetime access. Once you're in, you're in. Now the goal for the tariffs is to help really people to rely on the local manufacturing of their country. Now the reason these countries like America, not countries like America, companies like Apple tend to do a lot of their manufacturing and piecing together of their phones and their tablets in China or India is because the labor is much cheaper there. If you go to America and the workers are the ones who are doing that, you find that the prices are much higher. You pay per hour. Per hour can be a certain price that will... Actually, it was trending that if it was to be done in America, a phone would be how much? Did you see that trend?
Yeah, it would almost double the price.
No, more than that.
Yeah, I think 2003. I saw those mathematics. I remember.
It wasn't to double. It was actually to 10x.
Ah,
Yeah.
really?
Really.
Then the one I saw was with the new tariffs, I think.
Maybe the new ones. But the ones, if they were to do that and bring it to their own country and do that, all those will really hurt. And that's why Apple was one of the most hurt companies. The stock just tumbled when that news came out. Anyway, so it's to help improve the manufacturing industry within the country. But the problem, like I'm saying, that's the disadvantage. It tends to become too expensive. Materials, fetching some materials. That's why you're seeing a lot of wars that are happening. Trade wars, maybe we'll talk about, of those minerals that they use to put phones, cars, batteries, were also being a problem. That's why there's a lot of war in Ukraine. Americans came up with a partnership deal to get some minerals from Ukraine. Greenland, they're also trying to own it because of those minerals that are there. But to cut the long story short, that's what tariffs are. That's what they do. That's how they affect the country, because as a byproduct, inflation also becomes a problem because the prices of goods are starting to go up. So those are the consequences. So it's just because Trump went online and announced that, it sort of looked like a game and it was memes, but it really hurts the economies. Because immediately those tariffs were announced, if you look at the price of Bitcoin and safe havens like gold, had a very strong rally when that information came out, because people are going for safe havens. Then the stock markets were tumbling because now people are looking to be safer rather than to hold these companies which you do not know what is going to be the future. And currently, as we speak today, yesterday was another historical moment where they lowered it down to 10%. Americans lowered it to 30%, and the Chinese people lowered it to 10%. And as we speak, that's a big difference from where they were at 145, and I think China was at 135 or 125%. So that's a big, from 125 to 10%. That's crazy. So we have a 90-day pause where negotiations are going to happen. The US Treasury Secretary Besant is the one who was leading the negotiations that happened in Geneva the other day between the American and the Chinese people. So you can talk about the trade wars a bit.
Okay, so I think you've done a good job of illustrating. Actually, it becomes quite easy for me to explain the trade wars. Now, why do tariffs come in? Like, for example, why is it that Japan cannot export to us those Prados at 35,000? Why do we have to pay?
Yes.
Number one is our country, like you've said, because those revenues generally they go to your country. They don't generally go to the other country.
Okay. True. Good point.
So if you import things here and your country charges you tax, those revenues come to your country. That's why you can see Trump was highlighting that by charging this much, the Americans will gain billions of dollars, which would come in as the revenues that will be generated from the tariffs. Okay. And the problem with that, again, is what you've said. Goods become expensive, and if goods become expensive, then people consume less. And if people consume less, then business will generally not do well. Okay. So, for example, more Kenyans would be able to afford cars if we would have a lower import duty, or if we would have our import duty exempted totally. More Kenyans would afford cars, and because more Kenyans would afford cars, the economy would do generally well because more fuel would be sold. Like the standards of living would generally just go higher. Okay. But now, because we have the tariffs in place, then what really happens is there is also the downside now of the tariffs being implemented. The upside is what you are saying, where revenues come up for the country. But the downside is it makes trading between two countries difficult. Okay. So, for example, if you look at now us and probably a country like Japan, we don't export much probably to Japan. Probably the only thing you can export there is agriculture and farming things, probably coffee and other things that they may eat, like avocados that come from us. Okay. But then for them, they create very many things which they can share with us. Okay. But the fact that we don't have much to exchange for them to give us what they are giving us, what essentially happens is we have to charge each other so that we balance out that relationship.
Okay.
And that relationship is what will bring about trade surpluses and trade deficits. Okay. Whereby a country like the US generally will import more than it exports. While a country like China will export more than it imports. So if you think about the Chinese economy, to be precise, the Chinese economy is strong as a function of supplying other countries. Okay. So if other countries like us, Kenya, let's say even Africa as a continent, if we became self-sustainable where we didn't have to rely on these countries to bring to us these things, you would find that our trade relationship would have to change significantly, whereby the few things that we'll have to import from them and the few things probably they would have to buy from us, we would have to trade in a different manner. Okay. And trade is the heart of globalization. I think for anyone who understands globalization, whereby us, even us here as Kenyans, it is only this time in history whereby us as Kenyans can sit here and talk confidently about what is going on in China, US, Europe, and make money out of what is going on in those markets. I think if you just look back 20 or 30 years ago, that was practically impossible. For you to take advantage of Chinese markets and those markets, before the invention of the internet, you at least had to go there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Continue.
Or at least make a phone call. Okay.
Yeah.
But after the internet came along,
Can
then
do it.
now it became quite easy that even me sitting with a laptop in my bedroom, I can do research on BYD, which is a Chinese company, look at their earnings, look at how the companies run, and buy that stock and make money out of it. I think that would not have existed generally without the internet. And for those of us who are in Africa at this time, you might think you're living in Africa at one of the worst times. No, you're living in Africa in one of the best times, because anyone who preceded us didn't have that as a chance. Okay.
Because
And-
as you, just all your last point that your point that you're saying, just to give people a brief history, the reason why the stock market started, the first traded stock market company was a shipping company, and it's because of that trade. So, and it was back in the Netherlands, Amsterdam. So if you do your research, the first stock market, it was in 1770 or 1700s, the 18th century, where the shipping and discovering of new land and finding places like Africa and shipping back goods that were valuable in the country made it really there are many people who, so what used to happen, people used to send goods or import goods on those ships. And now not everyone could do that. So other people said, okay, if you guys are doing that and may believe you can, your business is very valuable. Why don't I own a share of your company? I
Boss.
don't have the resources as
Okay.
much as you do. You have the systems, you have everything. I want to own a part of your company. And that's how the Netherlands people came up with the first stock market that ever existed in the world. I've forgotten the name of that shipping company. But if you do your research, that's where the stock market started, because of what Ken is talking about. The trade relations and trading is basically because that's basically what business do. It's just you give me something, I give you something.
Exactly.
I solve your problem or a solution, service. It's always give me, yeah. I give you. So
if you think even about our country, like right now for us, I've realized that majority of the things that we use on a daily basis are things that were manufactured outside the country.
outside.
Yeah. We don't, if you look at your TV, probably it's manufactured outside the country. If you look at your fridge, probably made out of the country. Your cooker, probably made out of the
Most
country.
electronics.
Exactly. Much of the things that you use on a daily basis, you have not gotten to that point where you are manufacturing it here. And trade policy will definitely affect how much that particular thing is sold in your country. So it's very important for a people to understand that trade is the cornerstone of countries relating with each other. And that's why, of economies, relating with each other. And one thing that I wanted to emphasize, the reason why Trump was really using trade as a facility to not disturb, but to get a good deal with China, is because Chinese economy is heavily dependent on trade, unlike the American economy. Americans have built their economies out of services and human capital. If you think about what Americans are very good at, it's innovation. It's coming up with the Googles, the Facebook, the WhatsApps. That's what they have mastered, and they're very good at that. And then they export those technologies to us as a service. So you find that all of us in the world use Microsoft or some element of it, or use Facebook or some element of it, and many other platforms. But the Chinese, they're not like that. Even for the technologies that they have innovated, majority of them, other than DeepSeek, I think actually, if you think about it, DeepSeek is the first Chinese technology that has even that name in itself, DeepSeek. I think it's the first technological invention that has gotten an English name and has started in China. if you think about it. Because if you think about WeChat, if you think about Ikiwi, which is their, is it called Ikiwi or something? That's their YouTube. They have a different YouTube channel. They have a different browser. Baidu is the main browser that they use, not Google. So they have their own things that they use there, and they don't normally export it much, especially to the West and Africa at large. Maybe Asia, there are other countries. I've not gone to very many countries there to know, but maybe there are countries there where they use their technologies. However, the Chinese are heavily dependent on trading, and precisely trading with the Americans. Why? Because 40% of what the Chinese export goes to America. Okay. So about half of what they do trade is trading with Americans. And that relationship is really crucial for both parties, because also for the Americans,
Which, if you put it in context, is to the tunes of nearly $1 trillion.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah. If you think about it, also the Americans benefit a lot, because this iPhone, like you're saying, can be sold at a cheaper price because it's designed in California but manufactured and assembled in China.
Then
And
they have better margins.
and they have better margins. Okay, so and there are very many other technologies which are done like that. In fact, there is very little manufacturing that goes on in the US. What really happens in the US is design, and then you manufacture in China, and then the things are brought back to the US and exported across the world. Now,
Plus, on that also, China normally has a lot of rules, since it's a communist party and they want the people to benefit more, where they force you to create stations in their country so that you can sell in their country.
exactly.
So you find like Apple manufactures the phones there so that they can enter that market. So it's benefiting the people because the people are paid and it enters into their own economy. Tesla just opened their gigafactory, not just opened, but they opened it, a very big one, so that they can get entry into the market. I'm a big fan of entertainment and movies. I normally watch some movies where the production when it starts, they start 20th Century or Universal or Paramount, whatever. And you see a Chinese partner because they come, this is the main studio, Disney, then you see a Chinese company with partnership with this company. It's so that they can get that market. If you don't do that, you're blocked.
You can't access.
And you see the whole China in itself is almost like the whole of Africa. It's over 1 billion people. So it's a market you just have to comply by the rules.
It's a big market.
Yeah.
So we saw what Trump did on Liberation Day, slapping high levels of tariffs on most of these countries. China having to be the one with the highest tariffs, and China retaliated. And there was a war for about 2, 3, 4 weeks between the US and China, where tariffs went all the way to 145. I think the stock market lost generally some percentages. Nasdaq came from about 22 to trade as low as 17,000. We saw the Dow going down. Gold moved higher significantly from about 3,000 to top 3,500. The dollar lost ground, moving from about 105, 110 to trade as low as 100, probably even going towards 90 something. So there were very many big moves taking place. And now yesterday we saw the reversals taking place again. And the first reversal that took place was the 10% universal tariffs that were slapped on all the other countries, which didn't retaliate. That was the first change, which brought some optimism. And then the second change came yesterday when China and the US officially agreed to have a 90-day pause on the tariffs. And what does this mean? Generally, I think for me, Trump will still use that card. I think he's been a big fan of tariffs for a very long time, and I don't think he's about to just stop. He still will want America to have the best deal. Remember, he's pro-America significantly. And I'm sure even for him to back down, it's because of the pressure probably from Americans themselves have been pointing that, if these tariffs remain in place, probably we could see a recession, probably things could slow down, probably companies could lay off people, and he had to take a pause as he re-strategizes. Now, like Caleb was saying, if you observe how he makes some of these statements, you might assume that this is a game, or this is not a very serious decision. I've made this much in tariffs, or I'm going to slap this much. Some of these decisions are life threatening, I think, because if you slap tariffs, let's say if tariffs were left where they were, a company like Apple would very, very quickly lose ground, very quickly, because one, the prices that they would have to charge for their phones would mean that a market like Africa would have to disappear from their context. Right now you see very many Africans with iPhones. People, and if you look at how we buy iPhones, our market, versus how the West and other countries buy iPhones, it's different. In the West, someone can buy an iPhone with, a day's worth of work. A normal person, an average person, can work for a day, or let's say a week. A week is a good measure, not a day. A day is
Yeah,
it's too
because you'll
too
be
optimistic.
risking all of your money.
Yeah, but a week, you can work for a week, a regular job, and you can afford an iPhone. But in Kenya, there are very few people who can afford an iPhone with a week's worth of work. For most of the people here, for someone to afford an iPhone, they have to save up for quite some time. They have to put money aside and do many other things for them to afford some of these things. So, and you can imagine it's at the current price. So you can imagine with tariffs coming in, the prices will generally go higher. And I think
Yeah,
also,
and there's someone who says just a funny quote: if you have an iPhone and you lose it and you can't buy one tomorrow, you shouldn't be having an iPhone.
yeah,
Just
and that's majority of iPhone users, unfortunately. So
but continue owning it. If you own it, yeah.
yeah, so generally I think tariffs are not really, really good things. One, they a trade relationship is also like, remember, by the end of the day, even if we say it's China versus the US, the China and the US is not an entity. China and the US is people. Okay, so these are people trading with each other, and the minute there isn't trust, where people believe that you got my back and I got your back, it becomes very hard to trade together. Okay, because you find that the Chinese now will always be on the lookout that these guys in the US probably could do this and this too, and the US people will always be on the lookout, such that you'll find probably new companies might even say, we don't want to outsource our manufacturing in China. Let's do it in Vietnam. Let's do it in Taiwan. Let's do it in other countries also, which can have the same effects as China. And that could really bring a destabilization of the global order. The global order being, we know that, let's say if you're in Kenya and you want to import things, you don't go to the US, you go to China. If you're in US and you want to import things, you go to China. That's the global order. Now imagine if that is disoriented, whereby if you're a Kenyan and you want to sell iPhones, you'll have to import them from the US. That would be a totally different game, including the supply chains being used. Again, they would have to be restructured. You can imagine a ship that comes from China to Kenya now having to start from the US to Kenya. The whole ecosystem will change, and that would bring terrible disruption. And I think from what markets have done, or from how prices behaved, I think markets were almost certain that that could not happen, and that it was very risky if we took that route. Because yes, there was a decline, but if you look at the decline, like for me, with my experience in the markets, I would say it was a normal decline, just catalyzed by the fear that we don't know what is likely to happen. But I don't think this was a market that had completely lost hope and thought that there wasn't a shift coming. I think markets quickly realized very quickly that probably these guys will just sit down and agree, and that's why prices came down. But immediately we got the first pause, prices went back up, and then yesterday we just saw a big move to the upside. And I think generally now markets will start recovering. Generally, I also think the risks of a recession have also gone significantly down. The risks of inflation coming higher have gone significantly down. I think policies now will go back to where they were supposed to be going. So I'm really keen to also see how prices will reflect all these changes that have taken place yesterday. And I think for me, what I'm mainly watching is the dollar. I really want to see what will happen to the dollar. I'm also paying attention to gold. And I'm also paying attention to see what will be the long term solution of the tariffs, because I don't think we have figured out the long term solution to the problem. And the problem is fundamentally that the US feels like China is ripping them off and they want a better deal. And the Chinese feel like they're giving the US the best deal that is out there. So, how they're going to resolve that will really, really determine how trade will continue over the next few years. This is only 90, 100 days, I think, after Trump was put in power. So, there's a lot for the next 3 or 4 years before we clearly know where things will really, really settle, and then we can know how to move forward. But as of the moment, I think trade policy has settled, and I think we will likely have a good deal coming from those two major economies. And I've also realized once the two major economies agree, it's like a ripple effect. The other guys will also agree, because I feel like the main place where the US are trying to sort that deficit is with China. And it's with China where they think they're losing the most. So I'm keen to also see how that will play out, but it's an interesting time. The volatility is also quite nice for you to make money. And it's important, if you're a trader out there, to at least, this is where now I partly disagree with, like yesterday I woke up and markets were down about a percentage for the markets that I trade. And I couldn't help but wonder about the guys who say, don't okay, that's the wrong word. I couldn't help it but wonder about the
You
people
really
who say,
couldn't help it.
yeah, why not look at, or never look at news? Because like yesterday, if you didn't understand that this was a fundamental move, it would have been very, very hard for you to position yourself well and for you to understand even what was going on in the market. That was purely a move that came about as a catalyst for the news. So anyone who tells you, don't look at the news, it's not helpful. Someone might tell you don't trade based on the news, which is quite helpful. But looking at the news is okay. You can at least know that this is happening and this is how markets reacted. And in fact, some of the best trades I think for me I've realized come from the news. Like if you look at the trades that came about after Trump said that this is Liberation Day, those are some of the best opportunities. If you look at what happened yesterday,
Yeah, like
after
what happened yesterday when Besant came publicly,
yeah,
markets had not yet opened for my stock markets, the indices.
yeah,
It was a good bullish trade you could have executed
exactly.
just from that
Just
information
from
alone.
that information, and you will have made money.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
markets were up.
some of these fallacies, once you spend enough time in the market, you realize, yes, there are some data releases that are quite hard to pinpoint, what will the Feds do and all that. But sometimes when there's a catalyst behind a move, there's a good trade to be made, and there's some good money to be made out of this market sometimes. So that's what I think I would like to shed some light on. I don't have much that I can add on the trade, because even up to now we don't really know how the policies will realign, because you only have a 90-day pause. But Trump being who Trump is, and Trump being pro-America first, and Chinese also being who they are, and China being pro-China first, I think we are yet to see a soft landing where these things will just settle and the chaos will end. And I think till then, markets will still be in a state of uncertainty, but waiting for more information to be priced into the market. Yeah.
Good stuff. So yeah. So this video plus the other one, you can watch it because I explained what Ken is talking about. We looked at markets and how they reacted. And one good thing, if you watch a few of our videos past, you know how I trade, and I keep talking about where I'm currently. And like I said, even as a trader in your strategy, strong opinions weakly held. But currently, like I said, on the stock markets and the indices, I'm a net long trader. And the reason being, like if you look at Nasdaq 100, what I'm looking at right now, from when it topped in February 18th, thereabout, you can go check it out. And when it bottomed around April, this was April 7th, thereabout, markets had a 26% decline from top to bottom. But if you look at the recovery, and we haven't even gone back to previous highs, market has already had a recovery. Or if you bought the lows, you already have a 27% return, and it hasn't yet reached the top. That's why the bull markets, you find a lot of long-term traders or long-term investors, the Warren Buffetts and the like, normally like these discounted prices, follow fundamentals, and get this 25% discount on markets like Nasdaq, US 30. Those are very good discounts. When the market just goes back to previous high from the lows, on this market will be at 36% return. Okay, so those are things that I'm watching. And take what Ken was saying, what he's been watching. For me, I'm now watching the stock markets to see if it's actually in a bull market. A lot of speculation has already gone around that markets are back in a bull market. But what Ken is saying is also true. We don't know how the 90 days will end and what Trump will come back and say. You might see the market also, because markets don't just move up. We might get maybe sideways movement for some time as we near those prices, or depending on what we see coming up between China and US. Things might come up that might signal this.
So the Traders Show just got bigger and better. We're thrilled to announce that Pepperstone is now the official sponsor of the Traders Show. This means we shall have more content for you guys. We shall have bigger guests coming into the show, and we shall be able to reach a wider audience. Pepperstone is a world-leading forex broker that offers you a chance to trade different markets, including CFDs, currencies, commodities, and indices. To start off, you can open an account with them using the links in the description below.
But on the other news, just to talk about a few other things outside this, because I believe we've shed a lot of light on that. But as more information comes out, we'll come and share. But I have two things just to talk about. It's funny. You saw it's been speculating the Pope effect. You've seen the Pope effect?
No.
So the Pope effect is an interesting thing that is currently trending. And we'll talk about this in the next podcast because I do a lot of information markets and Ken wants to interview me on that. But anyway, this is not on information markets. This is just generally just added information. So the Pope effect, since the new Pope became Pope, the first American Pope that has ever existed. So during the weekend, he went publicly and prayed for world peace around the world. With what is happening with trade wars, with actual wars, Ukraine.
And now people believe the trade war because it was
So now, since that happened, the things that have changed in the past 2 days, Zelensky is meeting.
Are they meeting or he's planning to meet?
The meeting, they confirmed their meeting.
When?
It's this week. Where they're meeting.
I saw that one.
So there's that one. Iran, not Iran, I think it's either Iran or India, also said they'll cease fire with Pakistan. The trade was announced yesterday. Things have gone down. So sort of there's a Pope effect. Because a lot of deals have come in the last 2 days alone since the Pope went worldwide and prayed. So you can imagine the effect that can have on people's beliefs.
Yeah.
Because it's already a thing that I'll show you maybe after the podcast. Maybe the guests can watch. I think by the time you're watching this, it would have passed away. But it's just something called the Pope effect. Other than that, China, you've heard about the Chinese housing bubble that is being speculated to be worse than the 2008 financial crisis.
No.
You remember Evergrande? Because I remember when we were talking about that.
Yeah.
Those were the first signals.
Those were
that were
like
coming
3 or
out.
4 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's gotten worse.
And they're already in crisis.
They're already in crisis. So it's something I was watching the other day. I think it was some good guy who does these things on financial markets was also talking about it, showing how much money, because the housing bubble was state-backed. Even Evergrande was state-backed.
So there's a lot of Chinese government money.
So Chinese government is the one that gave people the go-ahead to invest in this housing market. So you find that same thing that happened in the US. A driver owns 3 or 4, 5 houses that have not yet been built, like what happened with Evergrande. So you've paid a down payment because in China they have this belief where as a man, as Ken, you cannot marry and you do not have property that you own, especially a house. So there's that culture.
It's a culture of theirs.
Yes. So you find a lot of men or a lot of families fathers.
First buy a house before you
Yes,
get
even
married.
before you go, you are the houses symbolize.
It's like you're now a man.
Yes, more or less.
You can now have a family.
Yes, so those are few things
So
that
for me now, I should
it's not even think about it.
first buy property, not rent. I buy.
And a couple, not just one. So you find the same thing that was happening in the 2008 crisis. A normal person owns 5 to 10 houses, and they've not been built on the promise that they'll be built. Now, companies like Evergrande was coming and building and starting other projects because they're collecting money already from people, showcasing that they're going to build this. And the fact that Evergrande is state-backed, people believe in the government. So they believe in this company that is supported by the government.
But even that company that is state-backed could not defy the law of economics.
Now, a lot of companies were opened and a lot of companies invested in real estate. But these houses have not been built because also behind the scene, you find mismanagement and all that. So that's why a couple of months ago, there was a lot of, in China, we are hearing the strikes, people on the streets demonstration. And it was crazy. Actually, there was a speculation. Don't want to get deep into that because I've seen a lot of videos being banned because they actually went into that, where a lot of people were actually killed because of speculating against, because people are going against the government. Those companies have already gone bankrupt. So who will you go to? The people who said go ahead.
All these companies are bankrupt
Yes,
already. So there are no houses already.
The default, yes, there are no houses. The company doesn't exist. Someone has put all their money into this company. So there are a lot of empty houses. And you know the Chinese people, when they build houses, it's not like Kenya, just one tall apartments, which we already see there a lot. There they build. It's a whole, it's like a
it's
park.
the culture also. Yeah.
They have big, tall condos, penthouse, those buildings. And there are very many that are very empty. So, and now these companies, now to make it even worse, were raising money from Americans and other countries out of China to do this development. So it wasn't just taking advantage of people's money, they were raising money from outside.
So this is something that could easily ripple over to other places.
Yes. And that's why they're saying, according to speculators, it could be. It's just that China are not very transparent, yes. So
China hides.
even right now, people may be wondering, I have never heard this. If it's going to be worse,
China hides these things.
what you were talking about earlier, they have their own apps. They've banned Snapchat. They've banned many apps that every news outlets, media, what goes out is not
even
what
data. Sometimes I've heard people saying that data is not truly what's going on.
Exactly. So there's that. We can all do research. Just check it out. It's good to stay informed and look at what is happening. Yeah, but those are just some extra information I wanted to add. As we're looking at trade wars, there are many other factors also behind the scenes that are causing a lot of problems or stability in these economies.
Definitely.
Like that, because I hear the amount of money that has been lost by the government itself in this stuff is a lot. A lot. Like the time, you remember, when you go against the government, it's hard. You remember the richest person in China who used to be Alibaba?
Jack Ma.
When he went against the government.
Jack Ma was the richest man in China at some point.
At that time, before he disappeared for 3 months, was because he had gone against, he went in front and was against the, what's the political party called?
Communist Party.
Yeah, People's Party of China, the PPC, and Jinping. My friend, the next day he had to apologize and he disappeared.
Power
Not to
above
be
man.
heard. Yes, that's why they're saying it doesn't matter how far you've come in life or how successful you are business-wise. Going against the leader of your country, it could be something. I'm not saying be quiet. Maybe they're doing something that's bad, but also do it.
But there is no democracy. You're not allowed to speak the way you want.
So Jack Ma thought he was there and he was untouchable.
But he was quickly shown.
He lost 50%
of his net worth.
To
what?
See, because of that speculation, because now, you remember Ant Group was supposed to go live and it was supposed to be the biggest IPO. That thing was shut down. It's never happened to today. It does not exist.
So he was told you are not getting any more power.
And since then, Jack Ma anyway has been quiet. And so it's good to understand also the economy you're dealing with, what you're saying, Ken.
Yeah.
China is a place where you don't go against the people, even Russia.
Even Russia, Russia,
the
you
oligarchs.
don't-
We've seen a lot of oligarchs gone from billionaires to zero status.
That's why even in Africa, I find it weird that sometimes you complain that we
Yeah.
don't have a democracy. I feel
Actually,
like,
out there is worse.
yeah, if you look at, in fact, in our country, if you look at some of the things that people do against the people in office, I really do believe we have a democracy. If you go into Russia and places like even North Korea, you think you can
But
do
North
some
Korea,
things in North Korea?
Nah,
You can't.
yeah, some things, if you do proper research, you find that we're better off.
We're better off.
There's some people who are suffering.
Even in Middle East,
Yeah.
you think you can just go there saying, "Oh,
Against MBS.
you don't just do those things." So even in our country,
Yeah.
we have not, obviously the most mature democracy in the world is the United States, and then followed by some countries in Europe. Africa, we are trying. We are not yet there. But even for us to see guys like Traore doing what they are doing,
That's what I was going to talk about.
and these people in South Africa, I've also seen them against their president very many times. In Kenya, where the Gen Z protests, that is a sign of democracy maturing. Actually, if you were to use a chart and look at mature democracies and places where free speech is allowed, you'd be surprised that Africa, and specifically Kenya, would come above very many countries where people think there is no free speech or there is free speech. If you tell someone, you want to go to that country is not as good as here, someone might tell you, no, that country is better and all that. But trust me, some
North Korea is
countries,
bad.
you'd
North
rather
Korea, you
just be
can't
here.
What's his name?
You can even come for you here.
Kim Jong-un. I don't want to say his name.
Kim Jong-un.
In those places, you can, like the way we do here in Kenya, putting Ruto in a coffin.
Yeah.
My friend,
You can't do those
you
things.
put Jinping.
Yeah.
And then the advance in technology. Utapatwa, kwanza ni wote muli-repost.
Ni wote nachukuliwa. Honestly,
Yeah,
if you
true,
look
it's
at it data-wise,
Mm.
we're actually doing very well when it comes to people expressing their ideas, free speech being allowed,
There's some very bad
people
countries.
ranting. There's some
but-
countries where if you land, like I had some friends, I won't say much, but in these countries,
They're arrested.
and I asked them and they told me, I cannot even think about sitting down with you to discuss about particular things, even if it is not recorded. I just can't do it because it's likely to bring a lot of problems. So there I feel like, well, and often people make decisions without, not often, most of the time people make decisions based on opinions rather than facts. So opinion-wise, you might say, Kenya is a bad place, tumefinywa, you can't speak. You think that play that brought a problem in this country, what was the name of that play?
It one for BBC?
No, this play for high schoolers.
Oh, yeah. It
was called?
I don't remember what it's called, but I remember, yeah. I don't remember the name of the...
That one for Butere girls. Echoes of War.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. You think that thing could have been performed in Russia?
Or North Korea.
Or North Korea? Or China? My friends. It wouldn't even have... Even the kids themselves would say...
Just writing it down, the script.
Exactly. So, as we live in a place whereby it's not perfect, but trust me, it's getting better and we're really doing well when it comes to progressing in the right direction. And I think actually what I really like is how
But
people...
Is it getting better, or it's gotten a little bit worse with the hope of it to get better?
That's the thing that I was actually...
with Uhuru, we never had...
That's the thing that I was saying.
Such, he himself, he left Twitter
because of people.
because of the people.
Yeah.
I think...
And that's
I
what I'm
don't get
saying.
political, but yeah.
My point now was what you've just said. It could be that we don't want to go back where we didn't have free speech, and that's why there's a lot of rise against that. But also, if you look at generally the index across other countries, we're somewhere.
Yeah.
We're somewhere. We
somewhere.
have matured as a
We're not as
democracy.
bad as some other countries.
Yeah.
But we're
definitely.
bad, but not.
Hey,
Yes, I
you're
get
not
it.
the worst.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, but anyway, I think that's enough for this episode.
yep.
Don't want to get too off topic. Those are just some extra information. Maybe it's good to discuss because it's trending stuff that you guys also would like to talk about. But yeah, so yeah, I think that's it for this episode.
Yep.
And I believe we'll see you in the next one.
Yep.
So like we always say, stay woke,
Stay financially
literate. Yeah, and we're really trying to help you guys stay woke. So share this, watch it, share, like, and subscribe below. See you in the next one. Peace.